No random loose nose skin today. Okay, so today I'm going to be looking at the Galaxy S2 in 2018 and beyond, and why it's good, why it's bad, and why you should or shouldn't buy it. So hey guys, my name's Ryan Thomas with Failtech. This is the Galaxy S2 in 2018 and beyond. Let's first talk about the design. It's very square. A lot of phones nowadays are going for the rounded corners, the rounded design, the curved edges, the smooth glass, the different circles. There's a lot of circles and edges and sweeps and curves. And I believe there's something called the horizon line on the OnePlus 5T or something. And back when the Galaxy S2 was a thing, there were lots of squares in the design. There's a square around the camera, there's a square around the camera bump, there's a square screen, there's more of a squared off design, there's a squared home button. Everything is very square, and it's something that you might like or you might hate about the Galaxy S2. It's very subjective. I personally like the design because it's very easy to hold, even though it's got some fairly chunky bezels. Let's talk about those bezels. So this thing has a fairly low screen to body ratio, and with that gives you off-screen buttons, and of course the cool speaker up top with the front-facing camera, which is nice to see on something this old, and the capacitive off-screen button. So you've got the home button, the menu button, that is not a multitasking button, and a back button on the right-hand side, which is a similar layout to most Galaxy phones nowadays, although now we've swapped the menu button for, of course, the multitasking button. We've got a lock button on the right and volume buttons on the left, which is fairly standard. There's also a removable back with removable battery and microSD expansion, which is nice to see. However, with all this, you do get a headphone jack, but you don't get any kind of IP rating. So no weatherproofing, although this thing is kind of a brick, so I suppose it could hold up to a few drops, just maybe not in the ocean. It's funny how nowadays we've come to a more elegant design, but also quite a more utilitarian one, allowing for those spillages. So there's lots of plastic in the design, which is something you might love or hate. I personally find it to be okay. I mean, this thing's a very cheap phone and it's very old, so it's not something I'm going to bash on because pretty much every phone at this time was made of the similar materials. The chromey kind of fake plastic ring around the outside is a little bit tacky, but again, it's just something that was part of the culture back then. Also, I kind of like the squared off camera on the back. I don't know, it kind of makes it look a little bit more impressive than it actually is. I don't know, it's just down to me. The screen is small. It's a 4.3 inch display. And back in the day, this thing had a really large screen. It was coming up against the iPhone 4 and the iPhone 4S. So a 4.3 versus a 3.5 inch screen is obviously quite large. Nowadays, this thing seems to be really tiny. And of course, you've got those off-screen buttons, which does help, but the screen itself is such a low resolution that it means that all the elements on the screen are quite large and they take up a lot of the area and it almost feels crammed. It feels like everything's crammed in there. When you have a high resolution display, you can allow your assets to be smaller because they're clearer, and so you can fit more of them on the screen. This isn't so with the Galaxy S2, although it does have an OLED screen, which is nice. It gives you really punchy blacks, and the screen doesn't look too bad. But of course, when you compare it to even like a Galaxy S4 or a Galaxy S5, you're really going into the, I wish I'd just spent a little bit more money, because of course the Galaxy S2 is pre-HD, it is 480p. And also the fact you have to hold down the home button to get to multitasking is a little bit annoying and a bit inferior to, of course, the multitasking button, but when you come onto the system specs, you'll understand why multitasking wasn't a huge feature of this phone. With the Exynos 4210 quad-core chip and 1GB of RAM, you're not going to be multitasking. I mean, things are not going to be held in RAM a lot, especially as this is 4.1.2 Jelly Bean. It's very slow, it crashes a lot, there are a lot of kind of loading circles, and with 16 or 32 gigabytes of storage, you're not going to get heaps of storage either. You could use this phone as almost an MP3 player because you have microSD expansion, so you could just load up with a load of songs and just take it with you running or something, so you don't drop your precious new Galaxy S9 Plus or Galaxy Note 8. The design of the UI in the software is very dated. It's one that we've come on leaps and bounds from, like I said, within the hardware. It's a kind of design where there's a lot of textures, there's a lot of blacks, there's a lot of contrast. Nowadays we're going for the more minimal material design kind of look, and this is definitely not one of those looks. It's something that you can really feel the phone being old just looking at the software, let alone using it, which can be quite buggy and at times can crash just in the system settings, let alone in anything like the Google Play Store, which is of course the older version because we're not on anything higher than 4.1.2. App selection is also extremely weak because of course you have to either download the APK from an APK mirror site, or the actual apps that are on there that are supported are pretty minimal because of course you've only got a really low end old dual core chip and 1GB of RAM. Let's talk about the battery now. 1650 mAh is a really small battery, and iPhones tend to get a lot of flack for this, but this battery is even smaller than the average iPhone, say the iPhone 7 or 8. It's absolutely tiny and it doesn't hold charge very well, especially as it's a used and older battery. If you buy a new battery, of course you're going to get a better experience because it's newer and they're fairly easy to buy. You can get them off Amazon for like £4 or £5, that's fine. but the old batteries, if you buy this phone used, you're just going to have to replace the battery. Either way, the battery isn't huge, it doesn't have fast charging, it doesn't have wireless charging, and the port on the bottom is micro USB, of course. So you're getting a flimsy connector that doesn't charge very fast, and of course you don't get the convenience of wireless charging. So it's something that, again, it's added to the limitations of this functionality. You can, of course, buy extended batteries, which are batteries that go on the back, kind of stick out a little bit, and then you add a rounded case, and together it gives you a slightly larger phone, but also a much longer battery life, something that I found in my Galaxy S4, and I really liked that. The 8 megapixel camera on the back really isn't that good. It gave me a lot of washed out colours, and gave a really blurry, almost as if someone smudged their finger on the back. Back in the day when we first looked at these phones, of course they looked like amazing phones and the cameras and everything were just insane. Whereas nowadays it's got slow glass, its resolution of its sensor isn't amazing, it can only shoot 1080p video. The light you have to be in it literally has to be perfect for you to get any kind of good shot. It's not something I can recommend nowadays, and the front-facing camera equally is fairly bad. It's like a 2 megapixel sensor, shoots fairly low resolution video. It's not something I can recommend to anyone who uses the camera a lot, especially as this thing is getting outperformed by similarly priced modern phones. It's somewhere that I think we've really improved on over the past few generations of phones, and the Galaxy S2 just isn't useful for that. So overall, how useful is the Galaxy S2? Well, for around £40, I would have to say that this is not recommended. Okay, the display is kind of cool, it's OLED, but that's about the height of the functionality of the phone. The build is plasticky and horrible, the screen is really small and low resolution, the battery is tiny, and the camera is inferior to most cameras pretty much. There's no support, there's no updates, you're not going to get any kind of app compatibility with any modern apps, and the overall usability of the phone I found is basically unusable. It was crashing, it took forever to load any kind of web page, and I mean, again, it's just absolutely unusable. So final thoughts are that it's not recommended, although if you want to check it out, it's kind of cool to look back into the history. So I would recommend Googling it and looking at the sales and looking at the promo material and stuff, because it really is kind of cool. However, having one as your main daily driver, absolutely not. Even a secondary phone, I would hardly go for this. I'd go for something like a Galaxy S3 or S4 for a secondary phone. And that's about it from me, guys. I'm really sorry that this video came out a bit late. I was trying really hard to get some nice B-roll of it, and hopefully you've enjoyed that B-roll. It took a lot to set up, so hopefully it came out well. I really enjoyed shooting it, and I feel like it's a lot better B-roll than I'm kind of used to putting out, especially with these older phones. So hopefully you've enjoyed it. Please do subscribe if you're new around here, because it really helps me out, and follow me on social media, because again, we can start a conversation over there, and you can kind of get in contact with me a little bit easier over there. I try to look at every comment, and I know Mr. Who's the Boss commented on my last video. It's kind of cool. Shout out to him if he watches the video. I don't know. Either way, please do like, dislike, comment, subscribe, anything like that. And my name is Ryan Thomas with Failtech. Thank you, Ross, for supporting me on Patreon, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.